Life and business can be easy, but us silly humans love getting in our own way. My name is Nico Rapklis, and I've had a wild journey. From releasing traumas that I held on to for decades, to playing college athletics, working with multi-million-dollar brands, having a spiritual awakening, and now coaching incredible humans navigate their inner and outer world. The Just Grow podcast is my outlet to share and help others with life and business. After investing north of $100,000 into my personal and professional development, the Woo plus Do formula is what has served me best. A healthy combination of mindset, energetics, consciousness, spirituality, self-healing, and discovery, matched with a high-level strategy, principles, focus, optimization, and accountability to help you be, do, and have everything that has been placed in your heart. This podcast is for the impact-driven entrepreneur that is finally ready to start thriving internally and externally. Welcome to Just Grow. Yo, what's happening, my friends? Welcome to the Just Grow podcast. My name is Nico Rapklis. If you're new here, I'm really excited for this particular episode. This is going to be with my good and new friend, Anthony Mink. He is such an incredible human being, one of the most magnetic people that I've met in quite some time. He is the CEO of Live Bearded. He's also the host of the Entitled to Nothing podcast and has traveled to over 40 countries. Very wise human being, and we had an incredible conversation about life, about business, what it really takes to push past those fears and those limitations to really get you to where you want to go and become the most magnetic version of yourself. So you're not going to want to miss this particular episode. Before we dive in, I just want to let you know about our next live podcast event. It's going to be on May 11th at 4:30 p.m. It's a Saturday, and this one's going to be at a different venue. It's going to be one of the most amazing rooms for you to be in. This is going to be with my good friend Akshay Nanavati. He is about to go set 3 world records and become the first person to traverse Antarctica coast to coast by themselves, dragging a 400-pound sled for 110 days. And this event will be right before he's about to send off for that excursion, and we want to send it off with a bang. So we're going to have likely over 100 people at this event. It's going to be up in North Scottsdale. All the details will be at justgrowpodcast.com. You can also get tickets over there, but this is going to be one of the most impressive rooms that you will be in this year. We're going to talk about how Akshay is one of the most magnetic people that I've ever met. He's been able to raise over $300,000 for this particular campaign. He's also one of the most connected guys in Arizona that I've ever met, with the highest net worth type of community and network. So you're not going to want to miss this. Again, head on over to justgrowpodcast.com to go get all the information and get tickets. But without further ado, let's jump into this podcast with Anthony Mink.
Dude, Anthony, thanks for being here, man.
Dude, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so interesting how I meet and connect people. People ask me all the time, like, where'd you meet this? How do you know this person? I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah.
But I think we did meet on Instagram, which is obviously where I meet a lot of people.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
We had some mutual connections, and we got on a Zoom call, had a great conversation. You're doing some big things, and you're starting a podcast, and just really resonate with your message these days.
Thank you.
So yeah, it was in due timing that we got to sit down and have a conversation, put it on film, and I think people can get a lot of value from it. And
yeah,
I'm the benefactor as well.
Yeah, man, it's exciting to be here and you know, just connect with different people, like-minded people. It's crazy. We live 5 minutes away from each other. You know, we were just talking off camera. You've lived here for like 3 years. I've lived in my place for 4 years. We're literally in the same orbit. Yeah. You know, finally got connected. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I always say this, I don't have a huge agenda with this. It's just more about just connecting, kind of hearing your story, hearing some challenges that you've gone through. I think it's always really important to highlight those challenges. Yeah. Because I think there is kind of this misconception, and especially the entrepreneur space, that everything's easy, everything's cush, it's all good, and it's not. It's a lot of it can be a boring work. And it can be like a lot of challenges with it. I know I've experienced it. So would love you to just kind of share your story, and as you share that, I'll kind of pepper in and ask questions, but love to hear a little bit more of the challenges that you face and overcome, and the person that you become in the process.
You know, I think you're touching on something that really is important to me personally, which is the failure side of entrepreneurship. I think we live in a world where, you know, highlight reels of social media, everybody wants to tell you how quick they're growing, how fast they're scaling, you know, and there's this false perception that if things aren't going really good, you're doing something wrong. And I've fallen into that trap where, you know, my business is growing, We went from 0 to $1.5 million the first year, then 3 million, then 6 million. Now we're over 8 figures, and I always felt like, thank you very much. Yeah. In the process though, I'm looking at other entrepreneurs that are talking about, oh, we went from 0 to 50 million in 18 months or whatever. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why, what's wrong with me? Like, and then there's days where you wake up and you're like, fuck, I just don't want to do what I have to do today. Like, I don't know if I love this business. Like, I got to do all this bullshit work I don't like, and there is just days when you don't want to do what you need to do. Right? And I've come to believe that that's what separates people from having an average life and an extraordinary life is, like you said, a lot of times there's things that are very boring, right? One of my favorite mentors is a guy named Keith Cunningham. I recommend everybody check him out. Okay. One of my favorite books is The Road Less Stupid.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. Yes. And he says ordinary things practiced consistently create extraordinary results. And what I love about ordinary and extraordinary is literally it's just extraordinary things. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
And so most of the time, entrepreneurs get bored of doing the ordinary things. Yeah. And what I've come to realize in my life is it is the ordinary fundamentals. I'm a big sports fan. I love John Wooden, like 12 of 13 championships or whatever it was. And he's famous for teaching people how to tie their shoes. He takes the best athletes in the country at the college level and says, here's how you tie your shoes. Here's how you do chest passes. Here's how we do form shooting. And I think we're in a world where everybody wants to highlight how easy it is. They don't want to be authentic and vulnerable because they're afraid that will make them look less than or appear not as smart or whatever, right? But I think at the end of the day, the truth of life is it's fucking hard. It's really hard. And if you're an entrepreneur, the numbers are startling. I don't know if you've ever looked at this, but they say about 45% of all businesses will go out of business in 5 years. Okay. 80% go out of business in 10 years. And 95 go out of business in 20 years. So the longer you play the game of business, the greater the likelihood that you're going to die is. You want to know, the only other thing in history that I know of is gladiators. Like the longer that they stepped into the arena, the greater their likelihood of death was.
Wow.
And so I first heard this analogy from Tony Robbins, but he said, if you're a business owner, you're a fucking gladiator. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. The longer you play the game, the greater the likelihood of death is. And then what's also startling about entrepreneurship, and again, this is contrary to what we see on social media and the scale fast, grow big, 0 to 100 million or whatever, right? There's this false perception that everybody is doing so good. And there's a lot of people that are doing amazing, but I don't know the actual number of businesses in the United States. I think it's like 30 to 50 million. I should know this number, but I don't. Okay. Of all of the businesses in the United States, the Small Business Administration says only roughly 5% ever do $1 million in revenue. Per year, yeah. Now you think about the average business, it's the mom and pop restaurant, it's the juice bar, the coffee shop, the plumber, right? Like, and you and I are living in this digital world where we have so much scale, so much growth potential, right? If you're a local coffee shop, it might be hard to do, $1 million a year. The average business works 5 days a week, right? You got 50 weeks a year, it's about 250 days, so you got to make about $4,000 a day to get to $1 million in that kind of traditional work schedule. Yeah. So only 5% of businesses get to $1 million a year in revenue. That's not even profit, that's just revenue. Sure. Right? Do you know how many businesses get to the 8-figure mark?
Shit, probably like 0.02.
It's 1/2 of 1%, so you're very close.
Wow.
Said another way, 99.5% of business owners will never make more than $10 million a year in sales. So the actual numbers are so crazy when you look at it objectively that it shifts your perspective on how you're doing and how hard the journey actually is and what it actually takes. And that's why I've started to create more content. Originally, I was going to create business content as much as I was just lifestyle, personal development, like my journey of going from this, broke and bankrupt kid with no self-confidence to building a company that's done over 50 million in sales throughout my career. And I realized, man, the one thing that I struggled with the most on my journey is this idea of how hard it actually is and the difficulties. And if there's anything that I want to do, it's like I want to just bring authenticity to the experience of being an entrepreneur. And everybody's experience is a little bit different, but the one commonality I hear amongst the most successful people that I have had the opportunity to connect with is it's fucking hard. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's worth it. But if you work long enough and hard enough at doing the ordinary fundamentals, the boring things, eventually you get to a point where the value that you create extends so far beyond yourself that it becomes a very fulfilling endeavor, because you're actually adding tangible value and solving problems for people and helping make their lives better in some way. You know, whether that's the plumber that literally is on call at night and comes in and, you know, the toilet's overflowing and the newborn baby's there and they're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And, you know, you come and save the day. You know, or you build a big company that's digital or commerce or whatever. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship is about solving problems. I think that's also a disconnect I didn't understand in the beginning, is the way that you win the game of business is to outthink, out-strategize, and out-innovate your competition and find ways to add more value to your customers than anyone else could, any of your other competitors. You know, and so we're playing this game of value exchange, right? You give me value in the form of currency, and I give you value in the form of a product or service. For anybody that's listening that wants to make more money, it's a very simple equation. You have to learn how to solve bigger problems for people, right? I think maybe the best example of this is Elon Musk. He's the richest man in the world right now, not because he's the smartest, although he might be. He just might be. But he's found out how to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And he did it before anybody else thought it was possible. With PayPal, right? With Tesla, now with SpaceX. So he's not only leading an industry early, he's the guy that's blazing the trail, that's taking the arrows in the back, but he's also doing it in industries that have the biggest problems that need to be solved. And so as an entrepreneur, it really is about, I think for me, understanding it's gonna be super fucking hard. It's gonna take longer than I think it's going to. It's gonna be harder than I think it's going to. And whether I win or not is gonna be defined by, do I show up on the days that I don't wanna show up? Do I have the discipline to move when I don't want to? If I can handle that psychology and my own actions, then from there, okay, how do I find ways to add more value to my customers through solving better and bigger problems for them so they're willing to compensate me at a greater level? And I think in this game that we play of business, I mean, I've fallen in love with it, brother. Like, I think business is the game of life. And if we look around us right now, everything that we're experiencing was sold from someone to someone by someone for something, right? We live in a world where commerce is everything and it touches every aspect of our lives. So what better game to play than that of capitalism? Capitalism has raised more people out of poverty and created more prosperity, growth, and advancement than any other system in the history of the world. And I think we need entrepreneurs like ourselves that are young, that are hungry, that are doing it for the right reasons, that have a mission-focused business or a mission-focused message to go out and lead the charge, because at the end of the day, we're the next generation of leaders. And it's upon us to step up and lead this culture and this, you know, the business community and the society to the next level of thinking and growth. And it's something that I'm deeply passionate about and excited about.
I can feel it, man. Thank you for that. Gosh, there's so much that I wanted to comment on. Well, first, I did want to just really make a note of this because I think it's really, really important. Because what you said is like, you know, the numbers that you were doing, and then you're kind of just like this, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and I said, like, congratulations. Yeah. I really want you to, like, I'm sure you've heard that, and I'm sure you acknowledge yourself, but I do really want to acknowledge yourself. I want you to acknowledge yourself because, like, just what you shared with the numbers, like, most people don't get there.
Yeah, thank you.
Like, I've sat down with some other really impressive people, and I tell them that, I'm like, that's amazing. Do you realize how amazing that is? And they're kind of like, oh, yeah, well, I guess it was just like the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your take. We can kind of riff on this a little bit more, but I think more is a dangerous game, especially when you don't have the mission and the passion behind it.
Yeah.
But a few other things that I want to comment on. I think the numbers bring a lot of clarity, because a lot of people say it's hard.
Yeah.
Right? But, like, what does that actually mean? And when you quantify it and you get numbers, you're kind of like, okay, well, this is why it's actually hard. And kind of even on the flip side, I almost think it's like a mindset shift too, because, like, yeah, we could sit here and say it's hard, and it, you know, quote unquote is, but you also get to decide on how you want to look at it. And the last point, one of the last points that you said is, like, you've fallen in love with it.
Yeah.
And so if you really fall in love with it and you're passionate about it and you know that you're providing value and helping people, it's like, okay, it is hard, but I love it. And it's actually fun, even though it is, like, It's not the easiest thing in the world. It's fun. And I feel like I've had a shift recently where, when I started my company, I was getting really stressed out because of just
all the shit.
all the shit, yeah. But I've had a shift recently where it's like, it doesn't have to be like quote unquote hard.
Yeah.
Like, I can have fun with it.
Yes.
And I saw a quote that said, the person that is having the most fun is the person that's winning. So those were like a few of the things that I wanted to comment on. But yeah, all that was gold. On the thread of you saying like business is solving problems, I would love to hear your take on how you said, okay, I want to start a beard company.
Yeah.
What problems were you solving? And did you see that from the beginning?
Yeah, I didn't see it as problems in the beginning. And I think most entrepreneurs don't.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, if you ask 100 entrepreneurs or 100, people that want to become entrepreneurs, why do you want to do it? The answer is money, freedom, or time.
Yep.
And really, freedom encompasses money and time. Mm-hmm. And so it's a self-serving journey in a lot of ways. Now, there is a small percentage of people that have a traumatizing experience, an issue, or something that they've experienced that they're like, I want to solve this problem. Like, if I'm having this, I think other people are, and I think I can make something out of it. I actually don't think I think that's the minority of the situation. I think most of the time, people are like, I just want to make some fucking money.
Yeah.
I want freedom. And we're driven by this idea. I am driven almost solely by the idea of creating life on my terms. And that means I can spend my time, my energy, my resources how I want, when I want, where I want. So in the beginning, I had just the most basic desire, bro. It was like, I decided in 2009 that I wanted to learn how to make money online because I wanted to be able to move to the beach. Yeah. That was it. I was in Arizona. I was like, how do I make this happen? I filled out an Excel spreadsheet, all my expenses, how much money I had to save, and then I looked at places in like Costa Rica and Mexico and different places. And I was like, shit, if I could make $100 a day online, 365, like, I'm set. I'll fucking sell everything and I'll move to the beach. Yeah. And it took me about 18 months to learn how to make money online. I didn't know anybody. 2009, it wasn't like a popular thing, So it was like, I bought books, training courses, seminars, like all the things that I could. And slowly but surely, I figured out how to run paid ads and do social media and build funnels and do these things. And I got to the place where I was making $100 a day. I sold everything I had and moved to Costa Rica.
Sick.
And I lived in a guest house. And from there, it started to grow. 100, 200, 200, 400, 1,000, and then it just kept growing from there. And I got to the point where I was making more money than I ever thought possible, working less than I ever thought I could. And at that time, you talk about money being the scoreboard, right? I got to the place where I was making, $125,000 a month through affiliate marketing, working 4 hours a week with a team of virtual assistants. And I had built a business that served me. Mm-hmm. Its only intention was to give Anthony what Anthony wanted. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it was amazing. Yeah. For about 2 years, 3 years. Because I'd never experienced travel, I'd never experienced freedom. I didn't know any of this stuff. I grew up in a small town of 6,000 people. My parents made $12,000 the year that I was a senior in high school. My dad was a timber faller. My mom was a stay-at-home mom that went to start cleaning houses because my dad lost his job, right? So there was abuse, debt, addiction, all sorts of stuff growing up. So I had no reference point for any of this stuff. So I'm traveling, all these different countries, living in Airbnbs, doing these things. But, Tony Robbins, he says, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Mm-hmm. And I got to a place where I had success without fulfillment. And I was like, wow, is this all there is? And I had to take a step back because I had built this business that was serving me and making me money. But it didn't have any fulfillment or meaning attached to it. And I went through this growth process. And I think most entrepreneurs go through this cycle. In the beginning, they want to make a business for themselves, for their own selfish needs. Yeah. In order to do that, they figure out how to solve problems or provide a service, right? And okay, they may care about their customers and they want to add a good product to the world or add value, but it's self-serving. Okay. But you get to a place, and this is what happened for me, you get to a place where there's a threshold on what you can do, create, or be when it's self-serving. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think what happens for most entrepreneurs that make it to the next level is they transition from selfish to selfless. Yeah. And going through that process, when I started Live Bearded, you know, I had worked as an affiliate marketer online, just doing my own thing for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, I went bankrupt, lost everything, 6 figures in debt, figured out how to do marketing, built it back, sold a couple of companies. At one point in time, I had sold 2 websites, got about $500,000 in cash in one day. And I was like, oh my God, this is more money. I've made it, I'm set.
Yeah.
Then I lost everything on my next business venture because I was more lucky than I was skilled. I was more talented than I was experienced. And so I went through this process where I was right place, right time, early in the social media game, lost everything. And now I'm like, how am I gonna figure this out? Like, can I do it again? Can I build it back? I went from nothing to something and now I'm back to nothing, you know, kind of that hero's journey, if you will. And I started Live Bearded really just out of desperation. It wasn't even my idea.
Yeah.
I had the marketing skills. I had the ability to know how to build funnels and do paid media. My business partner, he's been a good friend of mine for a long time. He was actually growing out his beard for No Shave November. And he's like, have you ever thought about like doing products for men or marketing to beards or whatever? I was like, I don't know, never thought about shit, no. And he's like, well, like we started talking about it. We've been friends for a long time. One thing led to another. We decided to partner on the business. And I said, okay, you'll be the spokesperson, the product expert. You'll kind of know, you'll be everything beard related. I'll do all the marketing. I'll run the back, you know, kind of behind the scenes business, etc. And again, because I knew marketing, we went from 0 to about $1.5 million in our first year. Then that doubled, and then, you know, we got to 8 figures. And it's really by doing the boring, fundamental things and just committing to like getting incrementally better every year that we can, every day that we can, etc. I don't know if that answered your question, but
no,
I think the journey is just, oftentimes it's just showing up for yourself in the beginning. And that's what I did. And I know a lot of other entrepreneurs are the same way. But you get to this inflection point where you're like, okay, how do I bring more fulfillment and more joy and more meaning to this? And you know, I had a point about 3 years ago where investment bankers started looking at buying our company, and we got a couple of letters of intent, and we're looking at working with a broker. And you know, we got an offer for multiple 7 figures or multiple 8 figures. And
for Live Bearded.
Yeah, and I was like, I've never had to make a decision for this type of money before. What do I do? And as I thought about it, what I realized is, okay, I'm at a point in my career where I'm taken care of. Like I could sell tomorrow. I have a great, you know, platform and situation to build the next thing on. But what kept coming up for me was, how much bigger can I get this for my team, for my community? How much more of an impact can we have? If I got to this place, really just focused on me and how I build a business for myself, and now I've been validated that I've built something, what happens if now it goes from selfish to selfless? And now we're focused on building careers for people on my team. We're focused on building experiences for our community. We're focused on adding real value and uplifting, encouraging, and supporting not only my team, but my community of customers. And that's where I got really excited. And so that was the big shift. It was like, you know, my father passed away in 2020. We went through COVID, we went through all that bullshit. I took this really incredible trip for myself in 2021. And it just, that experience really changed the way that I look at the world. And that is what kind of allowed me to grow into that next season of entrepreneurship from selfish to selfless. And I think we all get there eventually if we play the game long enough. But where we start, I think, just depends on the actual reason why we want to get into it in the first place. And most of the time, it's a selfish, I want freedom, I want this, I want that. And that's perfect. If that's the inspiration, if that's the motivation that gets you going, fucking use it, man. Yeah. Lean into it, use it, let it drive you. But just know that over time, what fuels us has to evolve if we're going to evolve.
All these things that you're sharing, it reminds me of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And the simplest way that I've heard it is like there's your base necessity needs, there's your servitude, and then top is like enlightenment.
Yeah.
And so what I've heard is that you can't graduate and go to the next level until those needs are met.
Yes.
And so like you said, you know, it's selfish in the beginning because I think I don't know. You could tell me what your thoughts are, but like I think it kind of has to be that way. You have to take care of yourself and put your oxygen mask on first.
Yep. Before
you're able to start handing oxygen masks out.
Yeah.
And it's different for everybody. like base necessity needs are different. Some people want to live in the penthouse, some people want to live on the beach.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I think that's just kind of like the evolution.
It's perfectly said.
I love how you say that, and you have that focus now of like, how much bigger can I go? And it's almost like deeper that I can go, and like building up my team and building these careers. Because even my friend James, he's really shed a lot of light on me too, and he's like, I think it doesn't get highlighted as much about, like, a lot of the entrepreneurship world is like, how do we serve the customers? How do we serve the clients? And that's the focus. It's client centric. But what he kind of shifted, he's built a team over 50 people now, and he's like, there's so much fulfillment in like giving people careers that they were working a dead end 9-to-5 job before.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's exactly like the mission that you're on right now.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's this idea in business that the customer is always right, and I think it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Or maybe said another way, the customer comes first. I think that's bullshit. I think the team comes first. Right? If you're trying to build something that's going to grow beyond yourself, at a certain point, a business becomes its own organism that has, you know, and I play a critical role in the process and development of that. But gosh, I wish I remember what book I read this in. I can't remember, but it says the more valuable you are to the business as the owner, the less valuable the business is.
Interesting.
I wish I could remember where I read that. It was in some book I read recently. And I've thought a lot about that, because this is not ego, but just, you know, like, I'm a very valuable asset to the company right now. We were talking off camera. I'm not great at delegating at this stage in my career as an executive. That's like the number one skill I know I need to develop, right? Having the capacity to delegate responsibility beyond yourself and align your team with killers that are extraordinary at what they do, so you can focus on what you do, right? We talk about it a lot, but at the end of the day, as an owner, it's counterintuitive sometimes, because we birth this idea, we bring it to life. There's a lot of significance attached to that, maybe even a little bit of ego, which is not a bad thing, right? Fucking Kobe, Jordan, the best, Brady, like the best of the best have an ego. When they step into their arena, they're gonna fucking kill you. And you have to have, I've come to believe you have to have a little bit of that edge. For so long, I held myself back because I was like, I don't want to, you know, like have an ego or seem arrogant, or like I downplayed who I was and what I did. And what I realized is that was holding me back more than my capacity, more than my skills, more than my potential was. It was the story I had about, you know, I'm just a regular guy. I'm just, you know, I'm humble. I don't need to do these things. And it's like, no, you're a fucking killer. And you have to have that. And you know, the first time I heard it, I love Andy Frisella, First Form, one of my favorite entrepreneurs. And I remember I was listening to a podcast, and he's one of the first guys that at like a billionaire level status that I heard talk about not feeling good enough. You know, he's like, there's days I wake up and I don't want to do anything that I have to do. There's days where I wake up and I feel like I haven't accomplished anything, where like I'm nowhere near where I want to be. I feel, you know, like I haven't even like he's talking about this vulnerability, and I was like, damn, like that really resonated with me, because I felt that way a lot too. And obviously, I mean, miles apart. So to have a guy like that who's built billions of dollars of enterprise to say these things, I was like, okay, that seems stupid. But maybe it's equally as stupid as for me to say it about myself. And it was just like this perspective shift. But then on the next podcast, he's like, I'm the baddest motherfucker on the planet. And I was like, okay, hold on a minute. I need to analyze this. How can in one podcast you say like you feel like you haven't created anything, and in the other you're saying you're the baddest motherfucker on the planet? And when I realized, it was just self-affirmation. It was just him cheering for himself. Yeah. Him reinforcing his beliefs, trying to kill his self-doubt, trying to release his limitation. And so I think in business, we have to have, if we want to accomplish anything great, we have to have the belief that we can do it. And in order to do that, you have to have a little bit of edge, a little bit of swagger, a little bit of like confidence or arrogance that you are the one that can make that happen. And it's not in comparison to anybody else. It's not to say that you're better than or smarter than or more capable than anybody else. It's to say that you're better than you were yesterday. Yeah. You're going to be smarter, more capable, etc., than you were previously. So coming back as a business owner, there's a little bit of ego attached to like, oh, I'm the guy that does this. I'm the guy that does that. Like I create these marketing campaigns that have generated 50 million in sales. Like that's like, I got this skill set. Yeah. And it's like, actually the best thing you can do is be the generalist that's only needed when problems need to be solved and everybody else can execute without you. And that transition, I'm going through it right now, it's very interesting, right? But one of the things I remind myself is that every new level of growth, you don't know what the fuck you're doing, right? Because you've never been there before, you know? So it's okay for us to have those limiting doubts, those insecurities, those just fears of failure, if you will. You know, one of the things I believe is the fears, the doubts, the limiting beliefs that we have are given to us by our Creator as a signal to grow.
Wow.
That's a signal where we need to step up, step forward, right? It's a calling that we have more inside of us. I also believe that the desires we have, the word desire means of the Father. Okay. So when you have a desire, the visions that inspire you, the ideas that captivate you, they do so because they represent what's possible for you, if you're willing to have the courage to chase them. And you know what? You might not actually get there, but I think you and I both know it's not about the end destination. It's about who you become on the journey of trying to reach that destination. So I think the evolution of an entrepreneur, while it does start selfish in some ways, for most of us, it ends selfless because of who we become in that process and realizing that the game of business really is about service. And I think leadership is a fancy word for servant. And the true nature of a leader is to serve and support those they lead. And the best leaders create other leaders that can lead beyond them.
Yes. Yeah, it's a leadership game.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. Like in the beginning, like we talked about, you have to lead yourself.
Yes.
But then it's just like you keep on expanding and growing, and you're just leading other people, because it's like you create a leadership factory.
Yeah.
So that they can be leaders, so they can lead the next person. But I found that very interesting what you said about like, excuse me, being more of a generalist. And it's interesting you say that, and we were kind of talking off camera, as I really relate to like being kind of the unicorn in my business.
Yeah.
Because I'm very good at a lot of things, and I've historically had challenges with delegating as well. And when you say you have challenges with delegating, I mean, I look at it and I'm like, you were explaining early on that you had a team of VAs and you handed that stuff off. So, obviously there's levels to it, but that's just a really interesting concept, to be more of the generalist and not feel like you're the thing that's driving the company, because eventually, like you said, it's an organism of itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it is different for every entrepreneur based on their skill sets, right? Like if you look at a classic example of Steve Jobs, right? He was the visionary that was driving the ideas, the innovation, the strategy forward, right? He handed that off to Tim Cook, who is more of a operations generalist. So he's phenomenal at getting everybody to execute the plan beyond him, right? But I think, in my opinion, Apple's lost a little bit of its creative magic, right? They haven't innovated at the level that they did when their original creator was there. So I think, there's certain things as a founder you can't delegate. Culture is one of them. Really? You have to always lead the cultural vision forward. Yeah. The overall vision and direction of the company, I think you have to always be selling where you're going. This is one thing I've learned. I think selling the vision to your team is maybe the most important thing a founder does. One day we're going to do this. One day we're going to do that. When we get here, this is going to happen. Yes. We're going to make this happen. We're going to serve these people in that way. So it's that, and the merging of the culture and the vision, I don't believe can ever be delegated beyond the founder or beyond the CEO. The main role of the executive suite and the CEO is to set the pace and the tempo of the organization, the culture and the vision. And then from there, provide the support to help solve the biggest problems. But it really, going back to generalist versus specialist, when we get started in business, typically we have one specialized skill set that is a cash producing skill set. Right. Often people ask me, how do I get started? How did you get started? What should I do? And my answer is, you got to develop a cash producing skill. Whether that's the ability to trade stocks, to perform a service, to do digital marketing, to create content, like there's endless numbers of cash producing skills. But to get started, you have to become a specialist at some type of cash producing skill. Yeah. And then over time, what I've realized, and I heard, so I didn't even, like, I got to a point where I was like, I used to be really in the weeds of different aspects of the business, specifically marketing. I got my start as a marketing guy, right? So I love this shit. I love campaigns and testing stuff and tweaking things and seeing the success of the campaigns. But you get to a point where when you're running a team of people and working on a company as an executive, you're not in the weeds of it anymore. And so that separation made me feel like I was losing touch of what was going on, and I couldn't actually have the same impact. And I was kind of going through this identity crisis of like, what am I good at? And I think a lot of executives that make this transition from a specialist or someone who's a killer in one area to now zooming out and driving the company, you go through this process. And I didn't use this language. I heard this from other entrepreneurs farther along than me, but they said, as a CEO, as you grow, you become more of a generalist because you have to understand what's going on holistically. You can't be so specialized in one department. But in that process, what happens is you become a specialist at solving problems, selling the vision, inspiring the team, and if you're a great executive, leadership. And that to me is where like I'm trying to focus all my energy right now. The next level of growth for me is delegation, like we talked about, surrounding myself with a team of killers that can go out and execute, and then selling them the vision and casting the culture forward.
Well, I'd love to hear even kind of what we started talking about off camera, and it seems like it's the current season that you're in now, but I'd love for you to shed a little light on the things that you have learned in terms of finding the right talent, but also creating those leaders. Because even the thing that I'm definitely interested in, what we're talking about is like how you got your executive assistant to be your executive assistant without knowing how to like train an executive assistant. So I'd be curious to hear like what your take is on that, and then any other kind of like delegation things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not the expert in this category. I'm learning on the fly for sure. I think for me, what has happened is kind of what we were talking about before we hit record. When you get started, you just hire whoever you can afford. Yeah. And then you think, okay, I'll train them, I'll coach them, I'll help them. And if it's a 60, 70% solution to the job, great. Because now I'm getting time back and I can go execute. One of the things that, have you ever heard of Naval Ravikant? Mm-hmm. So I think he's a brilliant thinker. His book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, is fascinating because it's not written by him. It's a collection of his ideas put together by someone else. But in there, he says, like the average broke person, I don't want to be disrespectful, but like the average person ruthlessly spends time to save money. Yep. So the average person does everything they can to spend their time to save money. Wealthy people ruthlessly spend their money to save time. Yes. And so it's that paradigm between, are you spending your time or are you spending your money? Now, as an entrepreneur, when you're getting started, it's all time, little money, typically, because that's all you have. And then, if you think of it in terms of a scale, all time, little money, as you start to make more money, the scale has to balance. Yep. And ultimately, it should get like this, right? And so the more resource you have, the more resource you can pay people for their time and their skills. But in the beginning, you start out and it's kind of just like friends and family, whoever you can get, whoever needs a job, and typically they're not very skilled. And that's perfect because you can train them if they believe in the vision, you can go far with that. Over time, there's an inflection point where you get to somewhere in this range, time, money, where now you have enough money to cut down the time. And you go through this inflection point of growth where you're like, it costs me more in the business if I have to train someone and bring them up to speed than it does just paying someone an extra 20, 30, 40% in salary because they're gonna come in and be a killer immediately. And the first real example I had of this in my business is my executive assistant. Regina has changed my life incredibly, and I had no idea how to hire for this role because A, I'd never had it. B, I don't even know what you do with it. Yeah. And there's a little bit of ego attached with like, oh, I run my shit, I don't need any blah, 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 right?
But when edge that gives you the edge.
Yeah, but when you surround yourself with great people, you're far more capable. in your own right. And with Regina, fortunately I got good guidance. I hired an executive recruiter who was a friend of mine and helped me, and she coached me, and she's like, if you're gonna get this type of role, you have to find someone who's got 10 years experience, someone that can come in and actually lead you. And I was like, damn, that's a novel idea.
Yeah.
Like, I've never had anyone come into the business and lead me. I've been the driver that's had to lead them. And I was like, fuck, if that's actually possible, amazing.
Yeah.
And so we found someone who has 10 plus years of experience, worked with multiple executives, much higher level than me. And so now I'm like, I can tap into her experience with other executives that she's worked with. Hey, in this situation, like, how do you think about it? Or how have other executives thinks about it? Or how would I maybe do things differently? And it was the first experience I had in business where someone was actually leading me, building systems and structures beyond myself. And I like to think of, I like to create frameworks in my life and in my business. And I have this term, I say, once you have a framework, you can create freedom within the framework. Okay. So you have the rails, and then inside of that framework, you have the freedom to move and do whatever. And so she's helped me create so much freedom in my life because we've built frameworks. And I think one of the best things we can do in our personal life and in business is be very vulnerable with where our weaknesses are. And know that, like, this is an area I'm not strong, so I need support in that area. And I don't see myself as a particularly great systems builder, so I know I need people that are great at building systems. She's one of those, and then we hired another executive assistant for my business partner who is extraordinary in her own right. And then we hired a customer service manager who had tons of experience and came in on day one, had an impact. Day one, built systems. Just by re-optimizing our workflow for customer service, we created probably an additional 30% in bandwidth just by one right person. So there's a period where you have to go from generalist or from strategist to generalist, where you go from like time investment to money investment. But ultimately the idea is hopefully to get to a place where you have enough resource to find amazing people and empower them to lead beyond you. And that's ultimately where I think it becomes really, really fun.
I'd love to hear like an example of like where you feel like you've freed up much more with having an executive assistant that you didn't necessarily even know that you would when you hired her.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. Like, one of the things that Regina said to me in the beginning is, she's like, if I'm doing my job right, like, you won't even know what's going on. Things will just be handled. So there's a variety of administrative bullshit, whether it's legal shit that comes up, tax shit that comes up, accounting shit that comes up, whether it's, state regulation and certain things. I felt like every week, 5 to 10 hours of my week was taken up with just business administration stuff that no one else in the business could do. It was like contract stuff, it was tax related issues, it was contract or licensing agreements with certain people. I don't touch any of that stuff anymore, like managing schedules, trying to coordinate different things. If you have a lot going on, it could be a lot of time and energy just to manage everything. So I have an individual person that everything flows through. So it optimizes my time to where I can focus my time on the highest and best use. And then that puts the responsibility on me to actually do that. Sometimes we have to hold ourselves accountable to focus on the most important things. One of the things we're talking about a lot in my business right now is optimization. 23 was a good year for us. We grew about 25%, but our profit was down about 30%. And so in business, that's an inverse relationship that will grow you out of business. The idea is you want profits to grow parallel or faster than revenue does. And that is the mark of a really healthy business. So for us, we drove growth a lot last year. Last year was a difficult year for a variety of reasons. But so this year coming into it, the long story short is the theme for the year is optimization. And so I've been talking to my team about this. And if you and we have someone that we pay $100 an hour to do a job, but they spend half their time doing $100 an hour jobs and half their time doing $50 an hour jobs, we're losing $50 an hour half the time. Versus if we have someone that does 100-hour jobs and then we pay someone else $50 an hour, now our net payroll goes up $50 but we're getting $150 worth of work done versus $50 at $100. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you have to find ways to optimize based on the highest and best use of your time. And this was another idea I got from Naval. You have to assign yourself an hourly rate and ruthlessly spend your money to defend that rate. And I remember after I read that, I was like, I heard someone say, I don't know if it was in this book or it was kind of parallel to similar topics, but they were like, if you're a single dude or woman, whatever, but if you're single and you're an entrepreneur, you should never cook for yourself. Because the time you spend shopping, cleaning, prepping, all the stuff, like you probably are losing more money doing that than you would just going to eat out. And you could reallocate that time to just focusing on work if it's possible for you, and the investment would actually provide more results. And this kind of, you were saying off camera, like you started tracking scroll time, how much time you were doing this, how much time you were doing that. It's tedious. I hate doing this shit, but what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed improves, right? So getting really clear on what you're worth and then defending what that worth is at all costs, that's what Regina really taught me in the business. And she's helping me see things that I don't see. And the right people on your team will do that. They will have a different vantage point, a different perspective. They will see things different than you. And your job ultimately is to help people process information. I joined, do you know Patrick Bet-David? So he has a mentorship program where you jump on a call with him once a month. And I joined this year because I felt like he was one of the best that I've seen currently that's like doing a lot of high level strategic executive coaching. His book, Your Next 5 Moves, is a great one. I recommend it. But the whole call is this. And I'm spending $4,000 for 15 minutes of his time. So that's how valuable in terms of like, he has said his value is, right? So I get 15 minutes. Okay. The format is this. It's a 90-minute call. There's 6 business owners. We go around, we each get 15 minutes each, and then we have a book report we have to present because he makes us read a new book every month. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm paying this dude $4,000 for 15 minutes. I better bring the best fucking question, the best problem to solve, the highest, most leverageable thing that I'm working through in the business. But what's crazy about the call is here's how it goes. Anthony, what do you want to process today? And it's all about processing. Thinking strategically, trying to see something from a different perspective, a different vantage point, to get more clarity around a decision so you can make a more empowered decision. And what that taught me is, as an executive in my organization, that is probably my most valuable contribution. So rather than telling people what to do, it's like, hey, well, what do you think we should do? Have you thought about it like this? Have you thought about it like that? And help them process it in real time. Ultimately, as executives or as executives of a business or executives of our personal life, right? Our life is determined by the thoughts, feelings, and actions we take and the decisions that we make. And so how do we make better decisions? We get better at looking at things from different perspectives, different vantage points. I think this is one of the biggest problems we have in the world today is everybody wants to find reasons to justify where their way is right. And it's right or wrong, left or right, and we kind of have we have a very divisive culture, I think, to say the least, right? And people want to object an opposing opinion, and they want to reinforce their opinion and why it's right. And I think it was F. Scott Fitzgerald, he said, the sign of true intelligence is being able to understand 2 different opinions or 2 different ideas and see the logic in both of them, to hold both of those in our mind. And I think as whether, again, you're an entrepreneur, you're someone who just wants to grow, you have to teach yourself to observe instead of react. That's probably, I would say, one of the greatest skills that I've had the kind of opportunity to develop in my life because of circumstance is how to observe instead of react. We're humans, we get caught in the reaction, but if you can step back and observe and process, you're going to be able to make a lot better decisions.
Yeah, wow. That was amazing. So much gold in that. I've heard that quote before, like the mark of an intelligent person is saying 2 opposing ideas and not taking either. I think the way I heard it is not taking either of them as 100% truth.
Yeah.
And I heard this recently. and someone said it's just like an interesting thing to reflect on, is that there's no answers. There's just different perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agree. Like, I think our society is very entitled right now, and they're just going out there to justify things.
Yeah.
I love that you're getting that coaching from Patrick, that David, and it's all about just how to think from things from different perspectives. So a question I thought of is, as you were getting started into Live Bearded.
Yeah.
What would you say to that version of yourself in terms of like, here's a perspective that I would encourage you to look at the lens from, as opposed to what you're looking at?
Yeah. It's a great question. And so I recently, a couple weeks ago, I was invited to come speak at a mastermind of a few different types of businesses. And one of the questions they asked me was, hey, if I was getting started in e-commerce today, what's the fastest way to do it? How do I get going immediately? And I was like, I don't want to pick on you, but that is the absolute worst question you could ask. In the beginning, I just wanted to get started as fast as possible. When we were getting Live Bearded going, I was just trying to make as much money as fast as possible. And I had a very short-term perspective. In 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. Like, I was thinking in short increments of time, and that's the biggest mistake I made. I think if we're trying to get somewhere fast, we make bad decisions. Said another way, all of my biggest failures in life, whether it was investments, business failures, personal failures, my biggest mistakes came from short-term thinking, came from trying to get something fast, instant gratification. So the advice I would give myself 8 years ago when I was getting started with Live Bearded is, if you can have a long-term focus, if you can see in terms of decades instead of years, the runway that you give yourself to create something extraordinary is so much greater. It also takes the pressure off. Now, I've heard it said that all stress comes from false timelines. So if you're trying to get something done in a short window of time, you're going to put a lot of pressure and stress on yourself. But if you extend that time horizon, right, and maybe using an objective example, right, if I'm building something for 2 years, and in order to get the website and the business and kind of up and running, let's say it takes 20% of the investment of time, okay? So we've got 2 years, 20% of 2 years, that's all the time I have to invest into product, into marketing, into just kind of the overall business itself. That 20%, what is that, 4 months? 12, so it'd be like three and a half months. 4 months. So I got 4 months to try to build the foundation of this business. So I'm racing to get it done. Lots of stress, lots of pressure. If I've got 10 years, well, now I have 2 years of time to get product market fit, to build the foundation, to get feedback from the customers. I've got such a longer runway that I can dig deeper and build a much more solid foundation. And in the beginning, I didn't build a very solid foundation because I was just so focused on how do I get somewhere as fast as possible. And I think the world today, and this is one of my rubs with entrepreneurship, again, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, like as fast as possible, scale is big, grow, grow, grow. And it's like, maybe. I can only speak from my own experience, so that works for some people. Some people are the fucking scale, grow, sprint at all costs type of guy. I've come to believe that I want to have a marathon mindset with a sprinter's execution. I want to wake up every single day with a sense of urgency, but I want to think 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And I think that if we expand our time horizon, we underestimate what we can do in a decade and overestimate what we can do in a year or two. And that just creates so much false stress and pressure on ourselves. You know, I heard recently Warren Buffett, he was giving letters to the shareholders and he was talking about kind of where he's at in his career. And if you look at his career, it's very interesting because, and I don't know the exact details, so don't quote me on it, but he, he went from being, worth a few $100 million to many billions of dollars over the course of a short period of time. Said another way, I don't think I explained that right. From like 0 to 60 years old, he didn't really make a lot of money. Yeah. But from like 60 to 80 years old, he became one of the richest men in the world. His game didn't change, what he was doing didn't change. He just allowed the compound interest of growth to take place. And we understand compound interest in a financial sense, but we have compound interest in our health. Every day we're making deposits by meditating, working out, eating healthy, right? We have compound interest in our relationships. Every time we connect, get together, go out, dive into things, right? We can take advantage of compound interest in every category of our life if we're willing to have a long-term time horizon. So Buffett said, he goes, when I look back at the last 30 years of my career at Berkshire Hathaway, I can trace, and don't quote me the exact amount, but he's like, I can trace all of our profit to like 4 or 5 decisions of investments that we made. So what that means is I only need to make one good decision every couple of years, and that made me a billionaire. Wow. How was he able to do that? He didn't put false pressure on himself. He's playing the long game. He knows where he's going, and he's gonna work as long and as hard as it takes to get there. And so the advice I would give little Anthony and anybody out there who's just getting started or even on the path, the pressure you feel is typically coming from 1, ego. You feel like you need to get there faster, or 2, a false time constraint. And if you were to let go of the pressure and commit to a longer time horizon and understand that it's not about the destination, but the journey that we go on, you're gonna probably have more fun. You're gonna make better decisions. You're gonna enjoy the process more along the way. And ultimately, the value that you create will be, in my belief, far greater than what you would create with a false time horizon. You know, I could have only ever got Live Bearded to be a few $1 million in revenue if I was just always looking at a short-term time horizon. But along the way, 4 or 5 years in, I was like, we haven't really been able to make the types of growth that I want. Why is that? It's because all my decisions are governed by a short time horizon. I'm not investing into long-term things that will pay off in 2 years from now. I'm investing 2 months into things that will pay off in 5 months from now. And just by understanding that time investment that we make in the beginning, it's like reaping and sowing. If you only plant a few seeds, you're not gonna have very much to reap. But if you spend a lot of fucking time tilling that fucking valley and farming and planting those crops, the more crops that you plant, the more you have to reap. So that would be the advice I give to myself.
So good, so good. I just love that you say that. I'm constantly reminded, and it's reinforced by a lot of the smart people I've surrounded myself with, of talking about that vision, and have not just like, hey, I want to have a successful year. I heard it was like someone goes up to different people in the organization and says, like to the janitor and says, how's it going? And he's like, great day. And then he goes to the manager, great week. And he goes to the CEO, whatever. Like, it just keeps going until he gets to the top, and he's like, great decade.
Yeah.
So I love that you said it. I'd love to share just a little piece of my vision now that we're on that thread, because it's something that's really driving me. I got challenged by a friend of mine to say, because like we're starting to throw our events again. He's like, what's really the vision with all this? And I was like, a stadium event. And so he's like, all right, well, like let's start putting it together. Yeah. And so we've really started, having like we're kind of just strategizing and whatnot, haven't like started like putting any real pieces in place, but I really see us doing a podcast event at Chase Field in downtown Phoenix.
That's amazing.
So that's what everything is driving me right now. And I kind of asked that question to Anthony Sarandrea, and it was a really cool answer. And I'm going to ask you that question as well, as like, what is success to you? And I loved his answer, because he's like, I want to have the best relationship. I want to be on fire for my wife 50 years from now. I want to be on fire with my health 50 years from now. I want to be on fire with my business 50 years from now. Like, and obviously everything changes, and on fire means different things at different times. But like, I guess that's what I would ask you is like, what is success to you, and what is your vision moving forward?
Well, I would say the primary driver that fuels me is life on my terms, right? And so being able to be in control and command of where I'm going and what I'm doing is kind of one of the fuel sources that drives me. I think the definition of success for me is doing what I said I was going to do, following through, regardless of how I feel. I think we're either being successful by the behaviors and the actions that we take, the decisions that we make, or we're being unsuccessful by the same metric. And so, I think for me, success is again, I don't necessarily, well, I just talked about having this long-term vision. I have a vision for the company. I have a vision for where I want to go. But I think oftentimes if you just, so you know where you want to go, you have a long-term vision, and then you come back to today and you say, how do I make today the best day? How do I show up, do what I said I'm going to do, et cetera, et cetera. And you chunk it down into what's controllable and what's right in front of you. That's really how I focus on it. But for me, man, it's just, I'm a single dude. I'm building a company. I just want, using 50 years from now, success to me would be looking back and saying I didn't hold anything back. I went all in on my beliefs. I chased my dreams. I believe at this point in my life, the biggest mistake I've made to date is not believing in myself. So often, growing up in an environment with a lot of abuse and addiction, I just grew up where I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. I had a lot of fears and doubts. I didn't really think I was capable of a lot. And now that I have just outworked all of my self-doubt and I've got to this point in my life where I have some results that would show me, most importantly, that, okay, like you are capable. Like you can make whatever you want happen. I've now realized the biggest mistake I've made is not believing I could do what I felt like I could do. That desire, the things that I really wanted to strive for but held myself back for. So to me, I think the ultimate decision or the ultimate success for me would be to reflect back and say, I didn't let fear or doubt or insecurities stop me from living my life the way that I wanted to. I think if we hold nothing back in life, we have nothing to lose.
Right.
But if we risk nothing, we risk everything. And so for me, at this stage, I just want to go all in on my life every day. Yes. I want to lean into my fears. As I said, I think those are a signal from my Creator that I need to grow and evolve and step forward. And so success to me means stepping into the discomfort, the limitations every day, growing through them. I have this canvas that I got printed out, and it says, the purpose of my life is to live with passion, inspire through action, and spread love everywhere I go.
It's so good.
And so that would be my definition of success would be in 50 years from now to say that I lived my life with passion. I inspired the world through action, and I spread love everywhere I went.
Gosh, that's so good. Mic drop. Well, I want to just dive into this because you kind of mentioned it. It's been big for me. And like what you said about like the biggest mistake is not believing in yourself. And it's interesting because I've had a handful of people, and it's an interesting thing to hear. And I didn't really know how to respond to it, but I just like took it as is and didn't like do my best to not have resistance around it. But I've had a few people that have said something along the line of, I wish you believed in yourself the way I believe in you. And so yeah, like self-belief and self-doubt has been a thing that I've continued to navigate. But the thing that I've really found solace in, especially as of late, is deepening my relationship with God and my faith. And not feeling like it's just me and I'm on my own. And I have someone that I'm leaning on that's really guiding me, and I feel a lot more peace. I feel a lot more protected. And you've mentioned Creator a few times, so I was just curious on kind of what's your take on that.
Yeah, I think either all of it's an accident or none of it is. And I choose to believe that none of it is. I choose to believe that there's a divinity to life. There's grace in everything. There's different words that people call it, whether it's God or the universe or Allah or Buddha or whatever. One of the things that one of my passions in life is to travel. That was the primary reason why I started my business in the first place. And I've had the privilege to go to over 40 countries now, and I've experienced different religions all across the world. I've been to, Catholic Mass in South America. I've been to a Buddhist temple. I've been to, Muslim churches, and I've just experienced the world. And what I believe is, if you look at the foundations, the teachings, there is a 90% overlap amongst all the teachings of the world. That. And all you have is a different name, a different rule, a different routine or practice you're supposed to make. But the foundation of it is that we have this Creator that has given us gifts and talents, and it's our responsibility as humans to take those gifts and talents, to harvest them, to grow them, to nurture them, and to give them into the world so that they live beyond us. I think life supports what supports life. And the more that you're out there supporting beyond yourself, the more that life is going to support you. And I think that's grace, you know, and I have a faith that life is guided, that life is happening for me, and that if it's none of it's an accident, then life is happening for you. And if life is happening for you, then all the fears, all the doubts, all the failures, all the challenges are given to you so you can grow.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've really embraced that more over the last few years. And I think, you know, some of it comes with experience, some of it comes with just time on earth, different perspectives, different vantage points. But yeah, I think we all have to have a faith in something beyond ourselves. Otherwise, what's going to carry us through when we are failing, when we are the cause of things? You know, my message through my podcast is you are entitled to nothing and your life is your fault. And I wanted to create this show called Entitled to Nothing because in my life, if everything's happening for us, if we're guided, if it's all an opportunity to learn and grow, we don't control the external circumstances in life. And a lot of people take this message very literally. You know, and I got a bunch of comments the other day. It's like, oh yeah, so my disability is my fault. My son, you know, having cancer is my fault. This and this. And I was like, whoa, okay, let's dig into this, right?
Yeah.
The external situations in life, you don't have any control over. They're not your fault. But how you react and respond is. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
And I just choose to believe and live my life in a way where I'm not going to give any power to anything that's going to limit me. I'm not going to allow any external circumstance the power over me to be a victim of that experience. And I'm going to look at life as, okay, God put me here for a reason. And I have every experience that I've had, the father that I've had, the failures that I've had, everything in my life has brought me to this point to create who I am. And that is guided. And it's my responsibility to take who I am and to go farther. And if we can do that from a position of faith, from a position of grace, humility, and a position of service, life supports what supports life. And so we'll have an ability to move through things with that purpose in life, with that perspective that others don't, if that makes sense.
Ah, that's so good. Dude, you're just dropping gold. I could sit here for hours and listen to you. Thanks for being on, man. I really appreciate this. This has been people ask me that what podcast episode? Because we're quickly approaching 100 published episodes.
Amazing, bro.
So
congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
Fucking awesome, man.
Thank you. That feels really good, and especially because I hear that like to be in the top 1% of podcasts, you have to publish like 20 episodes.
Yeah.
Which is insane. But where I was going with that is, you know, people ask me what was the best podcast episode, and I always say I really believe it's the most recent one.
The next one, yeah.
Yeah. So this has been absolutely phenomenal, man. I appreciate you coming through and just sharing your time, your energy, your wisdom. I'd say the last question I want to ask you is, what is your ask? And I'll let you take that wherever you want, but like, what would you ask people listening? What would you ask from me? Do you have any particular ask that could benefit you and help you in your journey? I know like you're in the what I've heard is the challenge that you're facing is the delegation. So if there's any like specific nuances in there, is there any ask there, or is it just like, what do you ask people to get from this?
Yeah. The whole reason why I wanted to start creating content is because, again, I never believed in myself. And I believe it's the greatest mistake that we make, is not believing in who we are, our skills, our talents, and to not making the most of our life. The only ask I would have of the listeners is to believe in yourself, to know that where you are is where you're supposed to be, to trust that life is guided and that life is happening for you, not to you. I would ask that the listeners learn how to be uncomfortable, because the quality of our life is in direct proportion to how much discomfort we can comfortably live with. If you want to have a higher quality of life, you have to learn how to deal with the adversities, the challenges. But to me, I think we make the world a better place by taking radical responsibility for our life. And now that I'm talking through it, my number one ask would be, have the courage to look in the mirror and say, my life is my fault. And where I am is a result of who I've been, and where I will go is a result of who I become. And if you can own that responsibility, if you can have the courage to do that, then you can be an example for everyone around you. And I think the greatest way to lead is to inspire through action.
Yeah.
So that would be my one ask to everybody as I talk through it. I mean, it's kind of a few, but believe in yourself. But most importantly, have the courage to take ownership of your experience, because power follows responsibility. So if you take responsibility for where you're at, you have the power to change it. But if you blame, if I said, this happened because of you, now you have power over me. But if you do the same shit and I say, okay, this is my responsibility. How am I going to use this? Now I have the power to grow and evolve. So that would be number one. And number two, if you got value from this podcast, I'd love people to check out mine. It's launching February 14th. It's called Entitled to Nothing. Yeah. And I'm going to have these types of conversations every week. A lot of them are just me sharing ideas and thoughts and perspectives from my experiences. But I think the greatest thing we can do is inspire other people to take responsibility for their life. And I want to lead in action in that way.
Yeah. Oh, dude, yeah. I would encourage everybody to go listen to it. I've caught the clips, and I'm excited to hear the full length episodes. And yeah, dude, you obviously have a tremendous amount of wisdom and life experience, and just also really just the governing thing to it all is that you're just a good soul of the earth type of person. And that's what I want to acknowledge you first and foremost, because I think that all the success that you've had is a result of you continuing to understand yourself more and just lead with your heart. That's kind of what I perceive. Yeah.
Dude, it's been a pleasure to be here. I love the content that you're putting out, the energy that you're bringing. You've got your own unique, style to things. And I just admire someone who has the courage to put themselves out there, to lead by example, and to do it from a place of wanting to serve others. I said for years I was going to start creating content or start a podcast or whatever. And I can honestly say for more than 10 years I held myself back because I didn't believe that I was worthy, that anyone would listen to me, that I had anything good enough to say, et cetera, et cetera. And so I really honor you for jumping all in and wanting to be a force for good in the world. I see that through your content and through your mission. And so it's a pleasure to be here, bro. And I have a feeling we'll have more of these to come in the future. But if there's anything I can do to support you, I'm here. And if there's anything I can do to the audience to support them, they can definitely reach out and hit me up on social, and we'll do what we can.
Is Instagram the best spot?
I think so for now. Yeah, anthonymink.com is my website. So you can go there. That's where the podcast is going to kind of be cataloged as well. And you can jump on the newsletter and do things like that. But yeah, reach out either there via email on the website or social media, Instagram.
Yeah, dude. Thank you, man. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure, bro.